Okay, in this video module, what we're going to do is take a look at how we can go about creating very simple lifts. And we will do this with the FuncPlat entity. And all it really is just an object that can draw as rather a brush or a model that moves vertically. And that's about all there is to it. We're going to take a look at how we can set the speed so that it moves up quickly or slowly. And we're also going to, after seeing how we can set it up so that it just goes up and down by default by simply touching it, if you will, we're going to take a look at how we can set up a very simple control system that uses a GUI to trigger it going up and down. Logan?
Okay. So the actual FuncPlat entity, of course, can be grabbed by right-clicking, going down to Func, and then we have FuncPlat. So there it is drawing as a simple brush. I'm going to go over to the Entity tab so I can select a model for it. I'm going to go to Models, then to Map Objects. From there I'll find the Lab folder, and inside of Lab I should have the loading platform. So there we've got our loading platform. Hit OK. Now it hasn't assigned the model immediately. To get it to show real quick, I'll just clone that one off. So there we have the one with the model, and I'll delete the original. So now we have a FuncPlat that is displaying as the model we want. Now what I need to do is set up where it rests at its maximum height. So to do that, I'll tab over to a front view and then drag it down just a little bit, just so that the base of the platform is a little bit below the height we're trying to achieve. So with this setup now, it's actually almost ready to work. And in essence it would, except that the height traveled is by default defined by the height of the model itself, which means it's basically going to start off just resting right under where it is now. We need it resting on the ground, so we're actually going to have to specify a height that this FuncPlat travels.
So basically what you're saying when setting up one of these types of lifts is you use the object, you basically set it up to its maximum height. But then you've got to go in there and tell it through a key how far down it's capable of going.
Right.
Now, is it going to start by default up high or down low?
It's actually going to start down low. Its starting position is wherever it is minus the height you give it.
Okay.
That will be its starting position.
Okay, good.
So what I need to do is we basically want it resting on the ground. So we see that it's about 128 units, except that the ground is another 8 below. You can see I've got the grid set to 8, which basically means I want my height set to about 136.
Okay.
Total height. Now, let's see. To set that, it's as simple as going over to the Entity tab, and let me add in, if we take a look at some of these here, we have height, total height of the movement. So height, 136. So with that in place now, we can pretty much go into game and test it out. So let me save the map and do a map lift, and we'll see if we got all the settings right. Well, it's on the floor, so that's one good thing. If I actually run up to it now, yep, it works.
Took you up. That's a good thing too.
And went back down. So I can jump down, take damage, and ride the elevator again.
Okay, so perhaps it was going up a little bit too fast. How can we slow that down?
Well, if we look back over on the Entity tab, we have a property we can set called Speed.
Okay.
So if we set that, now the way this is based, its default is around 200. So if we wanted to move half as fast, we could set the speed to 100 and reload the map. So now once we get on the lift,
nice, much slower.
So very easy to set how it reacts, how fast it moves. So I mean, that's really just all you need to know for getting a basic FuncPlat in the game and working.
Okay, now what if we wanted to trigger this with a GUI?
Okay, so we want to actually set this up so that it almost looks like a control panel as part of the lift itself.
Right.
So the first thing I'm going to need to do is grab a model that I'm going to apply the GUI to. I'll simply deselect everything and say New Model, so I can bring in a Func static with a certain model. I'll go up to Map Objects, then down to Com. From Com, I'll go to Plat GUI Stand and grab the Plat GUI Stand model. So there I've got it. Do the little clone trick to get the model in place, then delete the original. So now I have the GUI we want to use. Now, to line this up, I'm first going to drag it over to where I have the FuncPlat currently at, in its topmost position. And I'll use that as a starting point for lining it up. Let me move my camera view so I can see this a little bit better. So there we've got the model itself. I need to rotate it around a little bit, so I'll probably rotate it maybe 90. That looks about right. I think if I can see this, let's see. That, and then move the camera up. Yep, that's right. So then I'll just center it on the lift itself. But the problem that you'll see in just a second is the lift is going to start at the bottom and this guy will start at the top. We'll need to correct that in just a second, but one other thing to keep in mind is we're going to have to bind these entities. We want the control panel to move along with the func plat. So, simple binding, I'll go down to name. So I've got the current name of the func plat, and then I'll bind the func static to the func plat. So now it should move along with it and keep the, or just move as the func plat moves. Though we have one problem, is when this guy gets initialized and thrown at the very bottom of his height, the func static doesn't go along for the ride. Basically, we have to set the func static to start at the base by ourselves.
Let's take a look at that real quick.
So we need to find by how much we need to move it down. It's hard to eyeball it because.
But instead of doing that, let's go ahead and just save it real quick. Jump
to the game.
See
what happens.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
Show it.
So let's save it and load it up. So here is the current problem.
And watch this. It's going to maintain the offset since it's bound. When Logan goes over there and jumps on that guy, look at that.
So it is in fact bound. It's just the problem is when this guy gets thrown on the ground for a starting position, the panel doesn't get brought along with it. It's only after all this is initialized that it is then bound and then moves along with the func plat. To correct this, we're going to need to take its current. It's really not that hard. We just take its current location because say we wanted it lined up like so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know that the height that the func plat travels is 136.
Right.
So all we really need to do is go over to the Entity tab, look at its origin, and we see that in Z it's positioned at 144. We just need to subtract 136 from that, and that will give us the location that this guy needs to actually start at. So bring up the good old calculator and just take 144, 136, and gives us 8. So, okay, well, let's set this guy to start at 8 in Z. So now he starts on the ground. So now if I was to save the map out, we should have the alignment of the control panel model correct. And check it out. There we go. The model actually starts on the platform. So if we get on the platform, it moves along with us.
Okay.
Now all that's left really is to finish off the GUI and the trigger scenario. So first things first, with the func static selected, I'll assign it a GUI. And let's grab the good old light switch, which again is just found up under GUI's control panels. And I'm using light switch 3. So I've got light switch 3 applied. And now I need to target the func static entity at the func plat so that it can be triggered. So shift, select, control K, and there we go. We have targeted at the func plat. Now one last thing we need to do is select the func plat itself, and we need to set no trigger or no touch because we don't want it to activate until the user actually presses the button. So we'll set no touch to 1, save the map, and this should have our panel controlled lift. So we have the GUI applied, we get on the lift and nothing happens yet, but I can click on the on button for the light switch and that basically controls the lift.
Very
get off
nice.
And it returns. So we have a more complicated, a little bit more interesting platform setup.
Okay, but in the end, still simple lift. Okay, so that's really going to wrap up this lesson here. We just wanted to take a look at how we could use func plats to create very simple lifts and to make them controlled via GUIs as well. So with that, that's going to wrap up this lesson.